welcome to my Hit and Read, and this is my vlog for the Dewey's 24-hour readathon October 2025. It's 5 to 11, which is when 11 o'clock is when it starts here in Australia in the evening on Saturday. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stay up because the muscle between my neck and shoulder has been quite painful all day. I woke up, I think I must have slept poorly on it. I've had heat on it most of the day and it's still not really relaxing. So I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stay up. But I do hope to get at least an hour or two of reading done. What am I going to start with? Well, I'm actually leaning towards non-fiction. I'm not sure why, that's just what my mood is. So I've got A Wealth of Women by Alison Alexander, which has been on my currently reading pile for a very long time. Finally picking it up again, chapter 6, the 1920s. So that's on my list for this evening. And if I want a change, I'm actually thinking maybe some poetry. So Elizabeth Barrett Browning, I'm I think 40 pages into Aura Lee. The Aura Lee is like seriously like 300 pages or something. So these are the two, yes, that I am considering starting the readathon with. Depending on how long I read for, I'll probably set my alarm for 7, maybe 8 in the morning, and hope that I wake up feeling less sore, to be honest. But I have my favourite vanilla Coke ready to be poured out, and some sugar for the evening, and we'll see how we go. Happy reading, everybody. Hey, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, which technically means we're halfway through the readathon. I have not finished a book yet, but I have made some good progress. So last night I read a chapter of A Wealth of Women, which by Alison Alexander. That chapter was, I think, 30 pages long, and it was about the women's lives in Australia in the 1920s. And then I curled up and read about 22, 23 pages of Aura Lee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and I have now finished the second book of that poem. That poem is like 300 pages long and I'm only like 60 something pages in, so there's a long way to go, but that was progress. Then when I woke up this morning, I actually had a decent sleep. My neck is not 100, it's still a bit sore, but it doesn't feel as intensely painful as it was yesterday, so that's good. I did read a little fan fiction to wake me up. And then I read another chapter of A Wealth of Women. That chapter was even longer, I believe, and it was about, essentially covered the Depression and World War II. So yeah, that was like another 40 pages or something. So making progress with that. It's looking good. And then once I was up and dressed and ready for breakfast, I picked up The Scorpion Queen by Mina Fears. Basically I picked this one up because it's one of the shortest ones. I was already halfway through it and it is one of the shortest ones on my pile. So I have hope that it will be quickly finished. I've already read a couple of chapters, and there's a little over 100 pages left. So maybe 120 pages. Because it's only a little bit over 300 pages and we're almost at 200. So yes, that I'm hoping to finish that quickly this morning. And then we'll see where we go from there. But yes, that is it. That is my first update for the morning. Let's see how the next 12 hours go. Well, it's about 1:15 in the afternoon, and in the last couple of hours, it's my last update, I have finished The Scorpion Queen by Mina Fears, much to my frustration, because as it turns out, it finishes on a cliffhanger, and there's no indication anywhere on Goodreads that there is another book coming. So I don't know if she just hasn't written it yet, or if it's intended to finish and just be a single story as a cliffhanger, but that is deeply frustrating. But I did finish it. It was interesting. It's set in about a sort of fantasy version of 14th century Mali, as far as I can tell, based on the name of the emperor. And it did not go the way that I was sort of thinking it was going to go. And it's very much about female friendship and female empowerment. The romance did not end well. So yeah, we'll see whether there's ever a second book. But yeah, so that went well. So I finished that. And I have read another chapter of A Wealth of Women by Alison Alexander. This particular chapter was about the post-war boom years, and it was nearly 40 pages long, so that's a lot. I'm actually getting I've only got a few, like 3 chapters left or something. So I have what did I have? The next chapter is on the women's movement. And then there is one called The Struggle Continues, which is actually written by someone else. So it's like an essay. And then there is a chapter about today, although I say that this book was published in, I believe, 2001. So it's nearly 25 years out of date. So, because if you look at the bio, this was commissioned by a Commonwealth office and funded for the Centenary of Federation, which was 2001. So it will be about 25 years out of date. But so I've only got 3 chapters left, so I'm really hopeful I'm going to be able to finish this afternoon. I probably should eat some lunch, but in terms of what comes next on the fiction front, I'm thinking I might pick up my reread, which is Along My to Small Angry Planet, and see how far I can get with that one. Well, we're a bit past 4:30 and I have finished my reread of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Very enjoyable. I had to actually stop and take a picture of one of the passages because it was just so simple and so profound. Becky Chambers is amazing. It was essentially a conversation where they were talking about, you know, people are good and evil and everything, do evil things. But in the end, every person has to make the decision to try and be good. And that's the most important decision that you need to make every single day. You might not know the details of how you're going to manage it. That's logistics. But every single day it is your choice on how you interact with the world and whether you want to leave it a better place. Or whether you want to be a positive force, whether you want to be kind, whether you want to be compassionate, or if you want to be selfish, etc. And that is the most fundamental question people should ask themselves every day, every morning when they wake up. What kind of person do I want to be? So yeah, this is such a great book. I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of them. However, that is not for today. I think possibly I'm going to focus for the next little bit on trying to read the last 3 chapters of A Wealth of Women so that I can also add that to my finished pile. Seriously, it's been on my currently reading pile for years at this point, so I really should finish it. And then I will have finished 3 books on my currently reading pile. And then I'll make a decision after that on how much time I have left. Because, let's see, from 5 o'clock, that's 6 hours left. So we've got about 6 hours and 20 minutes left. I can definitely finish that, and then probably, I'm not sure if I'll pick up any more of these. Might read some more poetry, or I might just pick up something comforting to finish off with. I haven't read much actual Jane Austen yet this year, so maybe some of that. But we'll see how I feel once I have finished A Wealth of Women. So it's 6:30, which means there's about 4.5 hours left of the readathon. I have finished A Wealth of Women by Alison Alexander. It was very interesting. Also finally relieved to have finished it after it's apparently been on my currently reading pile for 4 years, according to Goodreads. So that is finished. Excellent. But what do I want to read next? Well, honestly, nothing on my TBR is really appealing except maybe some poetry for some of the Elizabeth Barrett Browning. But I also kind of want to really get through some quick things So I did two things. I'm deviating from my TBR. I checked my TBR shelves for short things that I might be able to read quickly, get off my TBR shelves. And I looked at my regular shelves for short things that I might want to reread. And hopefully I can get a few of these done. So my options that I've come up with. So again, I probably won't get up through all of these, but these are my options. I've selected this randomly when I was first getting back into reading, I went on some really big secondhand bookshop sprees and I would just buy anything that looked interesting, which is why my to-be-read shelves are so large. And so this at some point I picked up, I don't know why, but it's really, really tiny. It's a little chapbook and it's selected poems by Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, translated by Anne-Marie Schimmel. So I'm guessing some sort of maybe Turkish or Arabic poet. Not entirely sure. It was apparently printed in Ankara, if that tells you anything. But it's this tiny little, he was born in Afghanistan. What is currently Afghanistan, but it's a very old poet. So that's an option. I can probably get through a tiny little book of poetry really quickly. Also on my TBR shelves, I had this by Holly Evans, the Jane Austen Pocket Bible, Everything You Want to Know About Jane and Her Novels. Not sure where I picked that up. Probably Dimmicks or a secondhand place. But Jane Austen related, very small, probably a quick read, could be fun. Then I have this little novella, which I bought ages ago. It's Opie Battles the Space Pirates by Donna Marie Hanson. So Donna Marie Hanson is a local Canberra author who I've met, talked to at various conventions here in Canberra, and in various SFF conventions around the country. And I keep meaning to read her and I've never actually managed it. This is the one of her books that I have on my shelf. So maybe it's the time to read this. It's, again, not very long. It's like, what? 158 pages. Space Pirates. I love Space Pirates. It sounds like fun. We'll see how we go. Maybe that's will be a fun read. Now, for ones that I might reread, I have a handful. So, the shortest of Jane Austen's novels, Northanger Abbey. Might be time for a reread of that. I don't reread this one very often. I've had wildly varying responses to this novel depending on how old I am. But it might be time to give that a little bit of a reread. And I also picked up a couple of Tor.com novellas that I have read but have not actually reread. And so Elliot de Boddard's Fireheart Tiger. You might remember that I have recently read all of Elliot de Boddard's Zia universe. This is one of her short pieces, which is actually fantasy based, but again, still Vietnamese culture. So that would be a nice reread. And Burning Roses by S.L. Huang. I think I picked this one up on a whim, and it's sort of based on fairy tales, but women taking back the agency of being fairy tales, of being heroes, and the mistakes that they make and the sacrifices that they make. So yeah, that one also might be a fun reread. So not entirely sure what I'm going to pick first. I might actually grab a snack first. But yeah, I'm deviating from the prepared TBR to a TBR of little tiny short things. All right, it's just ticked over 11 p.m. Dewey's is over for another October, and it's time to wrap up what I managed to read because I'm quite pleased with what I achieved. So, first thing I have is Elizabeth Bat Browning, Orally. I read about 23 pages of that poem. Given that it's a 300 odd page poem, still has to go, but I did read a little bit more, so that's good. I finished The Scorpion Queen by Mina Fears, which is an Alcrate book that I was halfway through. That was probably about 160 pages-ish, 170 maybe. Not entirely sure, but yes, I finished that. It was a cliffhanger. I was not impressed by the fact that it was a cliffhanger. But, you know, it's finished and it was interesting, so that's good. I also finished my reread of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Changes. I was also about halfway through this when we started the readathon. It's lovely as usual. Like, I really enjoy it. It's quiet space opera. There are big political things happening, but they're not really a lot to do with what's actually happening in the book. The book is about the crew of the ship, and it's charming. So I've finished that, so I'm now ready to read the rest of the series. I also finally, after 4 years on my currently reading pile, finished A Wealth of Women by Alison Alexander, which I was probably just under just under halfway through. So that was non-fiction, and it is about the lives of women in Australia, sort of from 1788 when it was colonised to essentially 2001 when the book was published. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, and an interesting collection of stories and circumstances of ordinary women a lot of the time as well. So that was interesting. Then I decided to go and read some short stuff. So I read Opie Battles the Space Pirates by Donna Marie Hanson. So this is a novella-length book. I would describe it as a romantic space romp. Yeah, there's plenty of romance. There's plenty of romping about, trying to beat space pirates, and plans within plans, and plans that sort of interact with other people's plans. But yes, so this has been on my TBR shelf for years at this stage. In fact, Donna, who I slightly know through conventions, when I posted about reading this on Facebook, was like, "Oh, I didn't know you had that." Yeah, I did. It's been sitting there for years. So finally read it. It was fun. I then read aloud to myself for a bit and read selected poems by Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, which I've probably pronounced terribly, translated by Anne-Marie Schimmel. So this is 13th century poetry by a poet who was born in what is now Afghanistan but moved to Anatolia when he was young. And so there's a great deal of both romantic and I think religious poetry, if I was reading it correctly. So I read it's 80 pages, it's very small, and I read all of that out loud to myself, which is maybe why I sound a bit hoarse. Yeah, I picked this up in a secondhand store at some stage. I wasn't sure if I was going to read it. I've now read it, so, you know, that's good. It was decent poetry, but it's also translated, so it's hard to sort of get the nuances, and romantic poetry is not my favourite. Anyway, and then I finished off by starting a reread of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I am 62 pages in. This one I've read, I think, 3 times in the past and had wildly different reactions to it. So I figured it was time for a reread. It's not my favourite Austen, but, you know, it's Jane Austen, so definitely time for a reread. Enjoying it so far. I will continue on with it. So, all in all, I finished 2 novels and a non-fiction book that all 3 of which I was halfway through already. So, I read a novella and I read a collection of poetry and a little bit of other poetry and started rereading Jane Austen. So, not bad for 24 hours when I was sleeping through much of the first half. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with how that went. There's some books with queer relationships in there. There are books by people of colour. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with how widely I read this Dewey's Readathon. I'll wrap it up here and I'll see you all again really soon.